Welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we will look back on the pop cultural ephemera that remains in our cultural zeitgeist today and try to understand why we remain enchanted all these years later. This week, we will be revisiting...
Hey, where do you think you're going? Hey, wait for me! God, I love being a turtle!
There's really only one word for kicking off this podcast, and that is cowabunga, because we're talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, specifically the 1990 live-action Ninja Turtles film. But I won't be doing it alone. We have a guest today. Is my buddy Rich Baker. He is a comedian. He is a teacher. He's part of the West Side Comedy Theater and performs with Mission Improbable over there. So everybody, welcome to the show, Rich Baker.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it was fun to revisit this for sure. It's been a long time since I went back to any Turtles related stuff, but this was your pick. So tell me why you wanted to do this particular Turtles media.
You know, the Turtles, everyone who grew up at a certain time was a fan of the Turtles in some way, but I was an uber fan. You know, I very much had as many toys as my parents would possibly buy for me. I had the comic books. I watched the cartoons religiously. I had them all recorded on VHS tapes and would rewatch them and all that kind of stuff. And this movie... there was a lot of kids' movies that I liked as a kid, but it's one of the only movies that I loved as a kid and have never stopped actively enjoying to this day.
Do you have a turtle that is your turtle?
Yeah. My favorite turtle depends on which universe you're in. So, like, if you're in the standard 1987 cartoon universe, it was Michelangelo. He was the most fun. But from this movie, Raphael was 100% my guy.
Yeah, it's hard not to root for Raph in this movie. I mean, he is the focal point for sure.
Absolutely.
I think my guy was always not in this movie, but was Donatello.
Yeah.
Partly because he's a big nerd, and he does machines.
Sure.
But I had a lot of love for the Turtles because of video games, and there were plenty of Turtles games. And in the Turtles video games, Donatello always had the reach. He had the staff. So. Like, poor Raph has like a couple of forks, and he's just not. He was always like, yeah, you can punch a guy with a fork if he happens to get 3 pixels away from you. But because Donnie had the reach, I was like, yeah, this is my guy. Like, you can, even in like the games where it probably didn't matter, I would still pick Donnie. So he was my guy. But yeah, in this movie, he's a little underserved. Do you remember how you first like came into contact with the Turtles?
I don't remember first contact, like the story, but the first medium that I had them in was comic books.
Interesting. So you started with the comics.
Yeah, which I know was for people our age isn't mostly just the cartoon, but I was really starting it in comic books when I was really young, and because my brother's 14 years older than me, he exposed me to a lot of pop culture that was a little bit above my pay grade at that time, music, movies, and including comic books. And so I read one of these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books, and I was like, I love this.
Now, first of all, older brothers, I don't have one. I am the older brother. But I had plenty of friends with older brothers, and they are an important gateway, as you said, to all sorts of pop culture.
Oh, yeah.
They will always sneak you the thing you're not supposed to see. But that's really interesting. So when you read the Turtles comics, had you read any Daredevil stuff?
Probably. Yeah, I think I'd read a lot of Marvel at that point. X-Men, Daredevil, Spider-Man, all the big titles. And I really was, I think I was also just starting to get into DC about the time that I got with the Turtles. So I was really starting to round out my comic book education.
Now, I didn't learn this until much later in life that the Turtles were sort of spoofing Daredevil. It took me a long time to find out, they're called the Foot Clan because Daredevil goes up against the Hand. And his master is Stick, therefore we get Splinter. And, kind of the list goes on of like Daredevil connections to the point where the accident that gave Matt Murdock his Daredevil powers, he gets hit with the ooze in the face, it blinds him. And that canister of ooze is what rolls down into the sewer to give the Turtles their powers, which I really loved that bit of synergy when I learned it, because when I was a kid, I just had the cartoon. I had no idea that the Turtles were this darker thing, this edgier thing, and that they were trying to, be a commentary on anything else. I just thought, oh, cool, ninjas.
I knew at one point that they were spoofing Daredevil, but it was something I learned, I think, maybe 10 years ago randomly, and then just totally forgot. So until you said that, I certainly didn't make the connection in my single digit years.
No, Daredevil was he's a cool character, but he's definitely more of a second stringer.
Yeah.
In the comics universe. So I don't think I probably had heard of Daredevil until the Ben Affleck movie came along.
Oh, wow.
So, it just was not, I was not as keyed into comics. I was very keyed into comic adaptations of things. So, big on the, I didn't read a whole lot of Batman comics, but I watched a whole lot of Batman movies and the cartoon. Same for X-Men. So I knew these comics were out there, but it wasn't something I was reading regularly. The only comic I actually read with any regularity was I think I went out and bought the first 10 issues of Spawn when it came out. And I don't know why. What compelled me? It was when it was brand new.
Absolutely.
And I was like, oh, this is a brand new comic. Somehow I knew it was a hit, and I went and got these 10 issues and never cared about it after that.
There was something about Todd McFarlane. His Spawn came out right at the right time to where people who weren't into comic books really got into that particular title. I loved all of Image, Youngblood, Wildcats, Pit, Shadowhawk. There were so many titles from Image, and I once that came out, I became an Image uber fan. But that Spawn. I mean, those compendiums. I reread the Spawn compendium a couple of years ago.
I've heard the HBO show was decent.
Oh, it's worth it. If you haven't seen the animated show from the 90s, it's fantastic.
Okay. Well, bringing it back to the Turtles a little bit. So we're specifically focusing on the movie today. Do you remember getting hyped for the movie before it arrived?
Oh, 100%. The first time I remember seeing a preview, for the movie, which was, in the commercials of the cartoon, I was like, "Brr," and I just remember beelining it to my mom and being like, "There's a movie coming out. There's a movie coming." Just
it definitely felt it's at the tail end of the 80s, right? This movie comes out in 1990. So our whole childhoods in the 80s was here's a toy, here's a cartoon based on the toy.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Go buy it. Everything was just geared towards you are going to buy toys of this shit. And so by the time you get to the Turtles in the late 80s, it's oh no, we're pros at this. We are going to get you to love this thing and buy every bit of merchandise you can. So when it was it was obviously a no-brainer to make a movie out of it. But I do remember, I'm trying to remember when I first became aware of the movie. I don't know if it was a poster or there was maybe the trailer was either in front of Tim Burton's Batman or it was on the VHS that you rented. It was oh, coming soon to the theaters, and there was something in there. But I remember just thinking oh man, they made this just for me. Here it is.
Yes, absolutely. Now, and I didn't even find out till just a couple of years ago that all those properties that we loved, other than the Turtles, those toy lines were the first thing they came up with, and then the stories and all that stuff that came up afterward, like He-Man and Transformers and all that stuff. That was nuts.
Yeah, I didn't realize it until I went back and did a little research for this. So what happened? The sequence was that the Eastman and Laird come out with their Ninja Turtle comics, and I think starting in 83 or 84.
84, yeah.
Which led to a line of toys, which is what led to the animated series in 87.
Yep.
And then to this movie in 1990. So I would have assumed that, because what I remember of the toys were toys based on the cartoon.
Yes.
I didn't remember having specific memories of toys based purely on the comics.
They didn't make them for a long time. I mean, I don't think they made toys based on the original comics until 2000s. No, the first toys that came out, as far as I know, were all about the cartoon show.
Well, Wikipedia says different, but I'm not in a good position to yeah. But again, I'm not. That's all I'm relying on is Wikipedia. So take that with a grain of salt.
No. I believe you. I just that blows my mind.
Yeah,
taught me something.
Exactly. I had no memory of them, but apparently they were big sellers.
No kidding.
Which is interesting because the comics Turtles are much less distinctive. They're they don't have the colored headbands. They don't have as distinct personalities. They're only differentiated by their weaponry as they are kind of in later iterations.
Yeah.
But like I didn't realize how much this film was drawing on the comics more so than the animated show.
Yeah.
And so my nostalgic memories of this is one of the first times I remember really having to reckon with an adaptation that was pretty different from its source material in a lot of ways. I mean, I think the spirit of the Turtles is definitely in this movie.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of stuff from the cartoon that I'm like, hey, where is all this stuff? Where's Bebop and Rocksteady? Where's all the Dimension X stuff and Krang? Like, it's not in there. And so as a kid, that was a little harder to wrap my head around. And at first it expressed itself as disappointment, but then it was like, but I also really like this movie. It's hard to be disappointed. I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
But that was a little like cognitive dissonance I had to work out for this thing.
No, I was in the same boat because I remember, watching the previews and being like, where's Krang? Where's Bebop Rocksteady? Like, where's all these things? And I was afraid the movie wasn't be good. And then I remember watching the movie and being like, oh, this is a different universe, but they made something uniquely like an homage to both that was neither.
Yeah, I think if they had gone fully to the comics, you would have really disappointed the kids' audience. If there was like none of that, like at least they're color coded. They have they love pizza. There's a little bit of the cartoon in there to make sure you don't feel like left behind.
Oh yeah,
but, yeah.
Well, and the movie was marketed towards kids, and like kids should not, like I was too young to be reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics. Like they're not for kids.
Yeah, it's just an interesting, very stripped down version of this property because it is missing so many of the fantastical sci-fi elements that would come to define it. Yeah. To the point where I was like hoping like, oh well, this stuff is going to show up in like the sequel, and it sort of does, but still not really.
Yeah.
Even though they introduce Toka and Razor as like two more mutants, they're not Rocksteady and Bebop, and they're sort of barely in it, and they still never got to Dimension X and Krang and all of this other stuff. Which maybe if the franchise had continued, I never actually watched that third one. I know it's bad.
And the second one, like I defended it at the time because I just wanted to like everything that was TMNT. But the truth is, it's not a good movie, and like the Toka and Razor, like. If you don't have Bebop and Rocksteady at all, it's like, okay, you made a choice. But if you give me like a watered down version of them, like then you're just slapping me in the face.
Plus, they're babies.
Babies.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to talk too much about Secret of the Ooze. We can save that for another cast.
Sure.
But there's a lot here to really like about this movie, and going back to it, I was like, oh, this is a really interesting take on a superhero film, and I hadn't really thought about kind of its place in time.
Yeah.
Because this was, a year after Tim Burton's Batman, and that was such a sea change in terms of what a comic book movie could or should be, that you sort of have to look at this movie like as not as a response to it, but like certainly it has to be part of the context.
Yeah, so what's funny is the both movies went into production within 2 months of each other, and they came out, I think it's 6 or 7 months apart. There's people for years used to think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a response to Batman. It's like, no, they cooperated together because, before them you had Howard the Duck, you had He-Man, Masters of the Universe, and you had, what was the other?
Superman.
And then the 2 through 4 Superman, and they were just garbage. And so Hollywood didn't want to touch the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, even though it was the hottest kids property in town.
That was something I was surprised by too, that the movie ended up being made by New Line, which was at the time an indie house that was mostly known for the Nightmare on Elm Street series and not much else. And it's like, I couldn't believe that because the cartoon, the franchise was, you could not do anything without seeing Ninja Turtles on, here's Ninja Turtles lunchboxes. Here's Ninja Turtles paper plates and napkins for parties.
Yeah,
everything. They merchandise. It's like, I can't believe someone would have walked into Universal or Warner Brothers and said, "Hi, would you like to use our money printing machine?" And they said, "No, we'll pass."
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And New Line was a big part of it, but the first studio to get behind it was Golden Harvest, which had done kung fu movies and Cannonball Run. And they weren't even sold on it at first, but the person pitching it said, "Ask your kids what they think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles," and like that's what finally sold them. But yeah, Hollywood was they had seen all these comic book, sci-fi, whatever movies flop, and they were like, "Nah, not our thing."
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time for Hollywood to start figuring out how to do them. I mean, really, it isn't. I would think until maybe the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man that they start getting a little more consistent in their quality.
Yeah,
and certainly once you finally get to like the Dark Knight and the MCU, then they're kind of off and running. But yeah, like before that, it's like you got Superman 1 and 2, phenomenal movies. Batman, awesome. Ninja Turtles, pretty damn fun. And like, fuck all for everything else. Like, it's a desert.
I was trying to think the next movie after TMNT that come out that was any good, I think was Blade.
And that's 98.
Yeah.
Much, much later. I mean, otherwise in the 90s, you get like The Phantom.
Tank Girl, The Shadow, Judge Dredd.
Yeah, Tank Girl has, wow. Yeah, real, just bottom of the barrel stuff. And so it was cool to see this movie and go like, oh, they did kind of crack the code. Everything you need for a successful comic book movie is really there in terms of the formula.
Yeah.
And a large part of that is because they're borrowing the plot beats from the first arc of the comics.
Yeah. So
it was sort of already battle tested and worked out. I really like the look and the environment of this movie. It's such a, like, this is so much the 80s New York that I know. Now, I'm not from New York, but I have a long line of New Yorkers for family. So I have a bit of a connection to the Big Apple, but like the punchline for every New York thing was what a hole it is, right? At that time, it was like, yep, everything's gross. It's covered in garbage. It smells like urine. Everyone there is such a freakish weirdo that like that's part of the Turtles' cover. Is that basically no matter how weird no matter how weird the thing is that they do, people around them just kind of go, they just shrug it off because what are you gonna do? It's New York. People are freaks.
My favorite version of that in the movie is when Raphael runs into the taxi cab, and the guy goes, "What the heck was that?" And goes, "Looked like some of a big turtle in a trench coat. You going to LaGuardia, right?" And
yeah,
holy
that joke, like that exact joke had been made so many times, but that was the standard New York joke essentially. Like I feel like think of like Ghostbusters 2, like the Titanic shows up. And the reaction is like, better late than never. It's the same idea. Interesting connection to this version of New York through this movie. I always like looking for weird connections to things. But when I was watching it, I was thinking about Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, because that version of Gotham is this version of New York.
Yeah.
And John, I think his name is Pace, who plays Raphael, is in that movie.
Oh, nice.
He actually, so in the movie, Joaquin Phoenix's boss, he works as like a rent-a-clown. His boss is this character named Hoyt, I think is the character's name. That's him. That's Raphael.
Oh, wow.
So
I love that.
Little random connection there. This movie also has like no stars in it, which is interesting too.
Yeah, and the only kind of star that's in it, most people don't even realize he's in it.
Which is Corey Feldman.
Yes.
And he's Donatello, who does probably the least of any of the four turtles in the movie.
Yep. So
really strange that they were like you had one named actor, and you didn't use him. There is another actor though who would be a big name to anyone who knows voiceover stuff, and that is Splinter.
Kevin Clash,
who listeners would know best as Elmo for many, many, many years.
Wow.
He originated that character before he had some personal peccadillos and had to step away from the role. But yeah, very obviously a very different sounding voice here, but he's a Jim Henson guy, which brings me to the next thing I wanted to mention to this movie is it's all Jim Henson puppets.
Yes.
And it's so much better with Jim Henson puppets. Like everything is better with Jim Henson puppets, but
sure.
Like you look at like kind of the way their faces are articulated, the way their eyes move and stuff, like it's very impressive considering it's all done with practical effects.
Yeah. The original budget when they pitched the original script was $3 million. It wound up going a lot over that because $3 million was just the price for Jim Henson's like all his work.
His creature shop or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, without that, there is no movie. And of course,
100%.
in 1980, and when they're making this in 1989, there is no CGI. There's the only way you're going to see turtles on screen is by doing this.
Yeah.
But it's so much better. Like, I never saw the Michael Bay turtle movies. I've seen clips. But yeah, it's like,
Gross.
not only are they like terrible designs, which is a problem unto itself. They just look weird, but like they don't feel tactile. They don't feel like they're in the scenes. I mean, sometimes CGI is done well and you can fool people and you have, Gollum or whatever, but this is just, it just looks like pixels.
Yeah, no, I'm old school like you. I'll take practical effects over CGI any day, and I think this movie really still looks better than so many movies that are coming out, 35 years later, or whatever.
Yeah, because the stuff is actually on screen.
Yeah.
You have turtles, kicking shell in a real environment against real opponents. It's not, wire work and, a guy with a bunch of ping pong balls in a suit. Yeah. And everyone else trying to pretend that the ping pong balls are Michelangelo.
Yeah. And
I think huge boon for this movie that it was made that way.
And it was his last film.
Yeah. I don't think he lived to see it released. I think he died before it came out. It's a real shame. But I mean, his work is the puppeteering here. I mean, you can tell it's Jim Henson. Like, I feel like if you watch something like Labyrinth, you can kind of see a lot of the same. Obviously they don't look like the turtles, but like the way the eyes are situated in the puppets' heads and the way that they kind of talk, and also a lot of the like camera tricks they use to sort of hide the seams for that stuff, because like you have to be careful. You need to see the turtles talking to each other, but you have to kind of try and smooth over the fact that they can't lip sync everything quite perfectly. In some cases, not well at all. No. But you sort of don't notice. Like, they do it in such a way that you just sort of, it glosses over you, especially when you're a kid. But yeah, I never was like, oh man, they're Leonardo's talking, but his mouth isn't moving right. It doesn't feel weird.
Yeah. I don't know if you know or found any research, the whole coming out of their shells tour that happened.
Oh yes, I was aware of it. I want to put a clip of that in here somewhere, just so people can hear it, because it is the worst thing
well, it was my first concert.
Oh man, so you should explain what it is.
Yeah,
it's wild.
So the Turtles were already popular before the movie, but the movie, blew it up way more than it already was. And the Jim Henson animatronics things that they used in the movie, they took that and said, okay, let's do this live action. Not quite as much, but still pretty cool. And so they just slapped together an album of songs. They gave each turtle a different instrument instead of a weapon, and they put a little story to it with Shredder and April and the whole crew, and went around the country just doing this concert. I keep using finger quotes concert because songs, they weren't good, but to a 9-year-old, fantastic.
Growing up in a glass bowl with chameleons, lizards, and tadpoles, it hardly enters your mind that there's something better than this. A better sleep in a carrot, maybe a scene from the parrot. Believe me when I tell you the word gourmet just don't exist. But pizza power, a flying saucer food delights. Pizza power, oh, that's what makes us feel alright.
Right, and they're obviously not singing, they're not playing the instruments. It's pre-recorded. Yeah. The songs themselves, they have kind of a very, I guess, it's the early '90s, so it's got a very like New Kids on the Block, vibe to it.
100%.
So a lot of orchestra hits, songs about how tough they are, don't do drugs, etc.
And the rock ballad "Skipping Stones" about skipping stones on the lake. That's a big hit.
Is that where they tried to make it like emotional? That's where we have the like.
Yep, that's the emotional part of the show.
Standing in water looks like glass.
inside my hand. I just wanna ride it as I set it free. I'm standing. Keep on skipping stones on a smooth blue pane of glass. I'm skipping stones.
That's it. I think I mentioned on the last episode, which was about Weird Al, that was my first concert. So, neither of us were seeing the coolest people for our first shows, but it's okay. I really like kind of how the movie is well paced.
Yeah.
And they do a good job at the beginning, kind of like, you can tell that you're, like, okay, we've got these 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds in the movie theater. They can't wait to see the Turtles. And they actually hold back on letting you see them for, a good, I don't know, not maybe 10 minutes or something. Not that long, but long enough that, they're willing to take their time. So even when they first come out and kick a bunch of ass, you don't really see them. It's it's just dark and you hear sound effects and stuff and then they're gone.
Yeah. And then you see just a little bit of Raphael's face, but it's mostly in shadow, so you don't see much of that. And then you see all 4 of the turtles, but only their shadows against the sewer wall. The cinematography and the direction, I mean, looking back even now in my 40s, I think, this is good storytelling. Yeah,
I do think the cinematic language of it is actually pretty on point. And they, like I sort of said before, I think it's really necessary when you're working with, you've got 5 of your main characters are puppets, because you have to shoot them very, very carefully to make them look natural, to, again, hide the seams. And I imagine they had to do a lot in terms of being careful with the shooting, because I know this was a thing for the second movie, but it must have been for the first as well. But those suits are very heavy, and they're latex, and they're hot, and they don't breathe. So some of the actors I know got very sick or almost died from just, being overheated in them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, according to what I found, they were 70 pounds to, put on. And, it took forever to put them on. There's no ventilation. It felt very claustrophobic. And then, move like this, do like this. Okay, take 2, do it again. And then they would just, take them off so that they could breathe. And, apparently it was pretty cumbersome.
But worth it. Worth it in the end if you suffer for your art, right?
I mean, I think it's we're still talking about this movie for kids 40 years later.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't think there's been a better Turtles movie than this one.
No.
In any iteration, there was a few animated ones that were decent, but this really, despite the fact that it doesn't have a lot of the things that I would have wanted it to have, I'm still sort of waiting for someone to try and do a live action version of the 87 cartoon. I'm sure I'll still be waiting for a very long time. But having this movie certainly scratches the itch. It almost feels like it's Turtles Begin, right? This is the beginning of their journey. I think they even say something like that after they first defeat all these goons who are robbing April O'Neil's van. They say something like it was their first night out.
We just fought our first battle, Master Splinter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Their first one, which is interesting, because they are, they do still appear to be extremely skilled and know what they're doing most of the time.
Yeah.
So Splinter taught them well. What did you think of the different origin story for Splinter versus the cartoon?
I remember definitely noticing it as a kid and being like, wait a second, Splinter was a man. But looking back now, I love the movie for its differences, and I think that when they subverted expectations and go, this is not this version of Turtles, we're going to take this our own way. And I mean, little Splinter's just the cutest little thing when he scratches Hamato or Saki,
Oroku Saki.
Oroku Saki, it that visual of the face and seeing it there, I don't know, I liked it a lot. What did you think of it?
It was interesting. I was trying to figure out well, does it make any sense that he would be good at martial arts if he just watched this before he mutated? Why would he have the intelligence to understand this? But ultimately, it's yeah, whatever. It's a movie and it's cool and it's the Turtles, right? It's anytime you try to apply too much logic to it, you just have to sort of go, what am I doing? It's the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. Wait, could this rat have actually
emotionally it works? Yeah, it's like no, it's an absurd premise by design. So, but emotionally the beats work, right?
Yeah.
Like I buy Splinter. I think here he is much more like seemingly like frail, and compared to his cartoon counterpart, who's a little more robust.
Oh yeah.
But it works. I mean, obviously he's going to end up being the MacGuffin in the movie because they have to go rescue him. Yep. So it makes sense for him to not be as as virile as his other version. I did like the baby turtles. That's always a fun bit.
Mm-hmm. Pizza. Yeah.
For 15 years now, we have lived here. Before that time, I was a pet of my master Yoshi, mimicking his movements from my cage and learning the secret art of ninja. When we were forced to come to New York, I found myself for the first time without a home, wandering the sewers, scavenging for whatever I could find. And then, one day, I came upon a shattered glass jar and 4 baby turtles.
That was us. Shut up. Oh, no.
The little ones were crawling into a strange glowing ooze from a broken canister nearby. I gathered them up in an old coffee can, and when I awoke the next morning, I received a shock, for they had doubled in size. I too was growing, particularly in intellect, and I was amazed at how intelligent they seemed. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. One of them spoke.
Pizza! Pizza!
More words followed, and I began their training, teaching them all that I had learned from my master.
And another smart thing in the way the movie is paced is they could have made that a prologue, but instead they kind of actually have 2 big flashbacks throughout the movie to kind of dole out that backstory, and that can be tricky when you structure a movie that way, because sometimes it's like when you do a flashback, you're kind of delaying things we should already know as an audience, and it's like the movie would work better if we knew this 45 minutes ago than you waiting to tell us now, or the flashback is so obvious that it's like, well, now you're just wasting. I already figured all this out by the time you're telling this to me. So flashbacks can be very, very tricky. I think here they're well done, even though, obviously the audience knows the turtle story. I can't imagine anyone walking into a theater going, now what is this fuss about these the acrobatic turtles? Everyone knows the story.
Are they equestrians? What's their deal? I don't understand.
Yeah. I think they are very artfully done with like they're kind of the black background, and they're sort of meta. You have the turtles kind of breaking the fourth wall as the story's being told.
Yeah, again, visually, they go, okay, we're on a flashback. We're going to make this look very different. I think it's a nice little variety.
How do you feel about Casey Jones in the movie?
Oh, I don't know if this is how to pronounce it. Elias Koteas, I think, possibly is.
Yeah, almost Christopher Melanie is.
Yeah. I mean, I loved him. He was definitely different than cartoon Casey by a lot, but that was fine by me. I find him the much more interesting version of Casey Jones.
I agree, because this was not a character like the Turtles have a pretty deep bench in terms of like both like heroes and villains. There's a lot of side characters, and I know that's probably because they were trying to sell more toys. It's like here kids, here's the Rat King. Here's that metal turtle or whatever. I forget what he was called.
Mecha Turtle.
Mecha Turtle, yeah. So seeing him show up here was kind of like, oh, we've already got the 4 turtles and April and Splinter. Do we need another protagonist? But he does. I think he works. I think you need that human element to be sort of like that response, right? Like, what the fuck is going on here? What am I looking at?
Yeah.
to be the audience surrogate. And I think he works as an audience surrogate because he's more, he seems kind of be more disbelieving of what's going on. Yeah. April's more the investigative journalist who's just like, all right, once she gets over her initial surprise, she's like, I'm in. I'm just part of the team. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah, I think that scene between Casey Jones and Raphael when he's introduced is it's funny, it's clever, it's a little bit of a fight scene, but not really. I had no idea what cricket or crumpets were. I just kept but I would repeat that line over and over and over.
What the hell was that?
I don't know. Well, that was a crime, you purse-scrubbing pukes. And this is the penalty. 2 minutes for slashing, 2 minutes for hooking, and let's not forget my personal favorite, 2 minutes for high stick.
How about a 5-minute game misconduct for roughing, pal?
Hey, Bogey, now who died and made you referee? You did your job, now get out of here and let me do mine. These JV lowlifes need to be taught a lesson.
Not like that, they don't. Not from you.
Well, it looks like you're the one who needs to be taught a lesson, pal. Class is paying 101. Your instructor's Casey Jones.
Look, I don't want to fight you.
Well, tough rocks, pal.
A Jose Canseco bat? Tell me, you didn't pay money for this.
Ooh, that's it. Just do one sale, pal. Hey, what are you, some sort of punker?
Huh?
God, I hate punkers. Especially bald ones with green makeup. Who wear masks over ugly faces.
Ooh. Who better?
Strike one! Whiffer!
Home run! Raphael wins! 1-0!
And then when he says later, and he sees Raphael on the roof getting his ass kicked, and he goes, hey, you messing with that friend of mine? And you're like, oh, they're friends?
Yeah. Well, again, the relationships here are mostly between Raphael and other characters. It's Raphael and Casey Jones, Raphael and Splinter, Raphael and Leonardo.
Yeah.
And everybody else is sort of along for the ride, which is okay. I think it works for this movie to try and pick one of them to focus on just a little bit more than the others. I think it would be a harder story to tell if you're trying to send all the turtles off in different directions. That might make more sense for a sequel, perhaps, but I think here it works to make Raphael the main guy.
And I kind of like that, Michelangelo and Donatello are, they're just fun. They're the ones who are dancing. They're the ones who are watching the tortoise and the hare. They do the fight scenes and everything, but mostly
they also do impressions.
What's that?
They also do impressions.
Yeah, they do impressions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're there just to be fun. They don't need to have a character arc.
Maybe I'll fight Apollo and maybe I won't, What do you think? Adrian!
Hey, I got another one.
Oh, this is totally cool. Okay.
Not Cagney.
You dirty rat. You killed my brother. You dirty rat. Woo!
That must be Splinter's favorite. It was a joke.
If you're not going to give Donnie being the Q of the group, right? There's no turtle van. There's none of that tech stuff.
Yeah.
The most they do is they have him kind of help Casey Jones fix an old car.
Yep.
Or something. But I do think, it's worth sacrificing them to being kind of pure comic relief to have the balance of the story that you have with Raph and Leo.
Yeah. I was going to say, the one actor who wasn't famous at the time who became famous in this movie that not a lot of people probably know was one of his first was I always forget his name, Sam Rockwell.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, who is he in this movie?
He's the teenager who's like kind of the head teenager of the Foot Clan teenager recruitment thing.
And that's an interesting change from the comics as well, or at least the cartoon, because in the cartoon, the Foot Clan are all robots, which gives them license to have the turtles, whack their heads off with weaponry, as opposed to having real human beings bleeding to death from a side of the throat. But yeah, having Shredder basically sort of be Fagin in a version of Oliver Twist, where all of these New York orphans are just pickpocketing for him. It's an interesting twist. I wish there was a little more spent on like what is Shredder's grand plan exactly. Like he's clearly building an army, but we don't really know to what end.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what a huge opportunity they missed in the sequel of like they could have made a real story and gone into that more that because it was a fun little mystery of like what is this going on?
Yeah, why is he here? What is he doing? There isn't like a big heist at the end or something where he's like, I'm going to steal the mystical whatever. He doesn't do that. Like it's just like he's got this criminal operation, and then the turtles become a pebble in his shoe. So then the movie becomes let's go get the turtles.
Yeah.
You're right. I think that would have been a good angle for the sequel. Like again, maybe that would have been the time to bring in Dimension X. So like, he's doing this because ultimately he's in service of Krang.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Which they never got there, and I'm not sure why. I don't know. I would have to do more research on Secret of the Ooze to know, why they did. Was that did they consider that and then pull their punches, or was it just they just decided no, that's just not a direction we want to go in? I'm not sure.
From what I understand, once Hollywood saw that this movie with a $13 million budget made 135 in the U.S. alone, that they said, we'll take this and we'll do whatever we want to with it now. And they made it even more for kids, so they dumbed down the violence. They put in a rap song, that kind of stuff. So I don't think alien overlords were anything on their mind at the time.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like the calculation is sort of odd. It's like, well, we're going to make this movie for the fans, but not do the thing that's in the show they watch. It's weird.
I don't get Hollywood, but I mean, they haven't made a good video game adaptation movie yet, as far as I'm concerned.
No, there's a case to be made maybe for that like first Sonic movie because it's it's competent, it's fun, and I think those have turned out way better than expected. Probably because they didn't really directly adapt the games. They just said, well, we'll just have these characters run around in the real world. But video game adaptation movies, that's a whole other ball of wax because, they are by and large C+ at best.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. Like, it's like you adapted Legos into a movie and nailed it. Someone can do this. You can't tell me that there isn't a screenwriter smart enough to pull that off somehow.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get why Hollywood had such a bad track record with giving fan service for their stuff. It didn't make any sense to me.
I really like this version of April, kind of to get back to this movie. She doesn't look like her cartoon counterpart, except for, I guess, the beginning they put her in something kind of yellow.
Yeah.
But as far as, like, personality, and, she's spunky. She's tough. She tries to hold her own against these, street kids and stuff. I think they do a really good job of making her not a damsel. In fact, she's not really the damsel, right? She never gets kidnapped or anything. It's Splinter they kidnap.
Yeah.
I think she holds her own really well, especially given the fact that she's got to do most of her acting up against 4 dudes in rubber suits.
Oh, yeah, I think Judith Hoag nailed the role. And, you want to talk about, like, a strong female character. She's not superpowered. She doesn't even know how to fight. But one of her first scenes, she delivers this, really poignant news story. And then first thing, she goes toe-to-toe with the chief of New York police right in his office. Then she doesn't back down when her boss tries to put pressure on her. She fights back when the ninjas try and snap her purse, and even when she's surrounded by the turtles, she's still like, all right, she's still trying to be in control. I mean, I think her performance had to be the one to kind of connect it all, or else it wouldn't have made any sense.
Yeah, she really is kind of an anchor for, pardon the pun, but I mean, she is an anchor for the movie.
Yeah.
She really helps kind of, again, I still don't know if she's necessarily our point of view character, although they sort of treat her that way. She is, like I said, pretty on board with the Turtles from the first minute after that initial surprise. But like you said, yeah, they made her character really strong, really tough, just like she is in the cartoon. And it brings kind of this nice kind of grace note to the whole movie, because otherwise, yeah, you would just have the Turtles just sort of yakking it up. I mean, you could envision the movie without her. There is a way to structure the plot where she's not in it.
Sure.
But I think she is, whether or not she's integral to the plot, she's definitely integral to kind of the tone. And the performance reminds me a lot of another spunky female reporter. I think she's a lot like Margot Kidder in Superman.
Yeah.
She's very similar to Lois Lane.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great comparison.
I'm sure that's not accidental. I mean, I'm sure that, when they created that character, they said, oh yeah, let's make a Lois Lane, just like they were kind of making a version of everything else to put in the Turtles.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do think she is, distinct enough here. But they definitely share DNA.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, and that's one thing that's always been great about Lois, is that she isn't just the damsel in distress. She's pretty tough son of a bitch herself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if she was a damsel, it wouldn't work. It would be, you could envision a version where she's just, this kind of scream queen, getting kidnapped and getting rescued and stuff. And it would lose some of its juice. I think it's way more fun to have that character be able to hold her own.
Yeah.
I was actually really impressed watching this with the fight choreography.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it holds up. I mean, they hold up as exciting fight scenes.
Yeah.
But then you add on the challenge of, these poor guys in the suits having to do it. And like you said, it weighs 70 pounds, but they'll jump kick somebody. I couldn't imagine trying to jump with 70 pounds on me.
No, I couldn't even. No, not even a little bit. I would break every bone. But I mean, that was Golden Harvest. That was the reason why the fight worked, is because the first people to get in on this movie were they'd done so many kung fu movies, and so they had the people they had the talent who could rise to the challenge.
It shows. I mean, that. I think, these are four things. They are teenagers, they are mutants, they are ninjas, and they are turtles. And we've kind of talked about, we haven't ticked all of them yet. We've talked about them being, turtles and the puppetry. The ninjutsu is obviously an integral part of who they are.
Sure.
And if it wasn't, I think some of the later ones, it's weaker because, like you said, in the second one, they all have their signature weapons, but they don't really use them. Because I think parents groups were like, oh, we don't want to see someone getting hit in the face with a nunchuck. So, okay, Michelangelo has his nunchucks, but he's going to just punch instead.
Yeah.
And it loses a lot. You need them to be doing their, I mean, that's who they are. That's what they do, is they use these weapons. And it looks really good. It looks authentic.
Yeah, and, the little tricks, like when they spin Michelangelo, spin that wheel and he hits a bunch of them, and when they duck the head under to dodge the axe, it's I love being a turtle. I love that they played with the turtleisms. It wasn't just straight up fight. It's no, how would turtles fight, and how can we use these suits to really showcase what makes them turtles and not just ninjas.
And it definitely evokes for me the cartoon as well, because that's the cartoon is full of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
A lot of them basically breakdancing on their shells on the ground and kicking people that way, and using their turtleness to their advantage. I really I thought the way they express that is very fluid. It's surprisingly, it's not Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon levels of ballet.
Yeah.
But it's as close as you can get with their, with how encumbered they are.
Oh, yeah.
It still looks good.
And as you said, they shot the cinematography in such a way to where it hid the flaws and just showcased the parts that look good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the name of the editor handy. But man, hats off to him or her, because
No kidding, right?
that, to me, that is the secret sauce that makes all of that work. So that when one of them throws a punch or swings a sword or whatever, they cut to a reverse angle. They're able to do all of the stuff that keeps everything moving fluidly, even though they probably had to stop each take a million times to make sure that no one was getting hurt and that the people in the suits could breathe and everything was where it was supposed to be. And we got to reset and do it over again. Now it's all on fire. Okay, we better do it while it's on fire.
And they were shooting a lot of this in North Carolina in the summer. So
right, so add humidity to it.
Yeah.
My understanding is that North Carolina studio was used for a lot of famous productions. I had written them down at some point, and I've forgotten which ones they were, but there's a lot of movies you would know were like filmed there.
Yeah, but the reason they got it was because it was going bankrupt, and the people who owned it filed for bankruptcy, and so I guess the state owned it at the time, and they were just looking to get any production in there. So like when the Turtles came, they were like, "Yes, take whatever you need, take it all."
So they got it for cheap.
Yeah, which they needed. Can I tell you some silly stuff that from the movie that I just think is kind of interesting?
Yeah, of course, go.
In the movie, they order pizza from Domino's, but
yes,
the promotional of the movie, like all like the turtle stuff that you could buy, was all Pizza Hut. What's up with that? I don't know.
So they, wow, that must have been weird for them. Whoever like okayed that was like, they weren't aware that was in the movie, because it's got to be such a burn of they probably had like a screening for all the Pizza Hut people.
The guy's wearing a Domino's hat, a Domino's shirt, and the pizza box is perfectly framed with the Domino's logo. It's like not hidden at all.
Yeah, I mean, you see that red and blue, you know exactly what that is.
Yeah, 100%.
Man.
Yeah, that was just something.
They got, they got themselves into ET, so I guess they did okay.
Yeah. There's a couple of movie references in there. You mentioned Ghostbusters earlier. In the end of April's opening monologue, talking about the crime, she goes, "And all this crime is happening. Who you gonna call?" And it's like a direct call out to Ghostbusters. It's great.
I feel like there's a few other things in there, and I wish I had written them down, but there are definitely like nods to other properties. Just not necessarily subtle, but like again, showing the movie is very self-aware.
Yeah.
For as much as they try to be pretty much a straight putt, in terms of tone, they will throw those things in there. It's interesting. They do this thing where it's like, okay, the Turtles were raised on TV, by TV to a degree, so they're doing impressions, but like all the impressions they're doing are like so out of date, even for 1990. Like, isn't it like when Mikey's doing Jimmy Cagney?
Jimmy Cagney, yeah.
Like, what kid, like, this kind of reminded me of like when I was a kid, growing up in the 80s, and you'd watch like Looney Tunes or something, and there'd be like, oh, okay, this person is definitely doing
like Edward G. Robinson or someone. Yeah.
There's Edward G. Robinson. You hear the creepy guy from Casablanca.
Peter
Lorre.
Peter
Lorre is who I'm thinking of. Like, you would hear these impressions and stuff, and as a kid, you wouldn't know who they were. Or like you'd hear Simpsons characters that were basically these impressions, and you'd have to sort of work your way back to go like, oh, okay, he's doing this actor that he grew up on. That's who he's impersonating. It's just interesting to like put that into this movie and kind of go like, is any kid going to recognize who these are? Is this for the parents?
Not at all.
Like, I don't think I've ever seen a Jimmy Cagney movie.
No, I've never. That is my number one reference for Jimmy Cagney is Michelangelo's impersonation of him.
Him going, "You dirty rat." Yeah.
So there are 3 times in the movie where someone says "damn," and I got to tell you, as a 9-year-old kid, when everything for kids was super sanitized, to see this movie with a bunch of other kids, it's like one of the first things you hear Raphael say. Then you hear him yell it again after Casey Jones and him fight, and then you hear Michelangelo say "Ninja kick the damn rabbit" when he's watching Tortoise in the Hare. There are 3 dams in a movie for kids in 1990, and I just remember feeling so adult and liberated that my heroes, the things I love, were cursing at me.
I mean, it definitely feels more adult when you watch it, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit about the tone of this, gritty, ugly New York. This version of New York is much more the like Scorsese version of New York, especially compared to the cartoon, which like they live in the sewer in the cartoon, just like in here. But this looks like they actually live in a sewer. It's not,
right.
It's not this sanitized, well-lit space that's just like couches and Donatello's tinkerings.
Yeah.
It's and that made it feel adult too. Like, oh, well, this is a danger. Like people get mugged in this version of New York. This is scary. You could be walking down the street as April is, and just like dudes will just jump you or grab your purse and stuff. Like it's, it made it feel alive and kind of like, oh yeah, the turtles are real heroes. They're going to step in and save people from this stuff.
And that's when I think, and there's plenty of other movies we can talk about, whether it's New York or LA or other cities, where it feels like the city is a character that's very necessary to the narrative of like this story took place in this New York, and that's what made this story work.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there is that part about 3/4 of the way through the movie where they retreat to the farm, and I know that's a bit from the comics. But there's definitely that feeling of like it feels less turtley.
Yeah.
Like it feels odd that they're in the countryside. That just does not feel like a turtle environment.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
So yeah, you're right. Like that, the city of New York is, as it is a character for many superheroes and other movies. Like it definitely flavors everything. But because they are they are sewer dwellers. You go back to all those myths about alligators in the sewers of New York and stuff, and they really seamlessly kind of fit into that narrative. They're an urban legend. And it would be cool. I wish the film had a little more of that, because like the turtles, like you said, this is their first time out, so no one knows who they are. I think it would have been cool if at the beginning, there was stuff about, there was another sighting of the Manhattan turtle. No one got a good picture of it. That if that was a thing, like Hellboy does that, for example.
Yeah.
Where there's like, blurry photographs of Hellboy in tabloid newspapers and stuff. I think that would have fit right in here. I think that would have been a nice addition.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Like a conspiracy theorist, like, no, really, there's turtles, man.
Yeah, I think, actually, come to think of it, we mentioned Sonic before. That is the thing in this first Sonic movie. That there's like a dude who like believes he's seen him. Is the Blue Devil running around the city. Like, I think that... and of course, if you have a conspiracy theorist in a movie, they have to be proven right.
Sure.
By the end of it. But I think I think that would have been fun. But the movie finds it doesn't need to tell all these kind of like those jokes work in like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that stuff in Spider-Man, and here it's like we're going to focus on the turtles are funny because they're why we don't need to make jokes about them. They're going to just tell jokes. Like they're going to be the comedy delivery machine just by talking. And they nailed that for me. Like their characters are different from their comic book counterparts to a degree. Leo's still kind of the boring one as the leader, as he has to be because he's the responsible one.
Sure.
Michelangelo's the party dude. Raphael is cool but rude. In their own way, like that's unique to this movie. They're not just, they could have gone out and gotten the voice actors from the cartoons. They did. They did their own thing.
Yeah.
How do you feel about like these iterations of the turtles and their personalities?
I think honestly they're my favorite of all the versions. Probably just because when it hit me, but this movie of all the movies, in my life, I'd say if it's not the number one most movie that impacted me, I couldn't think of what is. And so like I'm gonna gravitate towards this version of Casey, this version of April, this version of the Turtles more than the others. And I just still think it's such a good movie that holds up, and I will defend it. Whether I'm at a party or whatever, if someone calls it, that old movie that was kind of, I'm like, I will talk about how great I think this is all fucking day.
How do you, kind of to bring this sort of towards the end, to me, the focus of this podcast has always been like, why do we still care about this thing?
Yeah.
Decades later. The Turtles have never really gone away. They've been rebooted and redone.
Yeah.
Both, in TV and in, there've been video games and there've been, all these other versions we've kind of touched on here and there.
Sure.
So the Turtles definitely have this kind of timeless universal appeal. But why do you think, I think if most people are going to say, yeah, if you want to watch a Turtles movie, though, people will still go back to this one. They won't go to the others so much. What is it you think that makes this movie the kind of like enduring thing it is?
The second best Turtles movie that I've seen is the 2007 movie TMNT, which was an animated movie, and involved like gods and aliens and that kind of stuff. And it's good, and I like it, but it doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like a cartoon movie. This feels like a movie. To me, like the original Batman does this as well. Blade maybe a little less so, but this feels like, factor out comic book or anything, this is a story about brothers who love each other, who lost a father, one's got anger issues, you've got all these interplays. It's just like, it's a good story, it's a good movie. And as I think Katzenberg or Brad Bird or one of those Pixar guys said, if you tell a good story, it will be timeless.
I think that's right. And I think, the Turtles themselves, like just the property, not the entire franchise, I mean, there are certain things about it that, like, yes, they are intrinsically cool, and they are, because they fight bad guys, they have a cool rogues gallery, they eat pizza, they're just quippy and funny. And there's like, they work for a group of kids, because I can imagine being on the playground and everyone goes like, okay, well, I'm going to be Raph. Okay, then you're going to be Donatello. And, you divide them up, whoever likes which one the best. Like, it's definitely engineered for kids to like.
Yeah.
They've cracked that. But when it comes to this particular movie, there's something about the way they delivered it that, as you said, sort of the way, I think everyone's going to come to the Turtles as a kid, not as an adult.
Yeah.
Even now. So when it's time to watch a Turtles movie, whoever is going to be the one in control of, the remote control, they're going to say, if you want to watch a Turtles movie, watch this one.
Yeah.
And not because, whether it looks a little dated because of the way it's done with practical effects or the cinematography or whatever. There's something about the spirit of this movie that perfectly channels the essence of like what the Turtles are. To me, that's what makes it work. It's like if you want to be delivered, like, here is a concise thesis statement on what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are.
Yeah,
you can't do any better than this movie.
And like any good movie or album or anything, it takes a village, and, it wouldn't have been the same with different actors. It wouldn't have been the same with different production companies. It wouldn't have been the same without Jim Henson, who, I'd say gets the MVP of anyone for all his work. And, so many people championed it, and, they had an original writer and then a different writer, and all this kind of stuff went through. And it just, by the end of it, everything clicked together in place, and, they knocked a home run.
I think that's a great place to bring this to a close, man. I think that is that's exactly what they did. So, Rich, anything you want to plug? Where can people find you?
Oh, sure. Follow me on Instagram at Rich Baker Actor, or if you're specifically interested in my improv teaching, at Rich Baker Coaching. If anyone's looking for some team building for their corporations or entertainment, find me at playlikeateam.com.
And if you like this podcast, of course, do all the liking, rating, subscribing, leaving reviews at iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever you want to find it. That is very helpful. I did say on the previous episode that we were going to be doing an episode on Goonies, which we still plan on doing. We had to do a little bit of a reshuffling with people's availability. So hopefully Goonies is next up in the lineup. If it's not, I got some other cool stuff that I want to talk about. So don't worry. But if you have feedback, please tweet it for as long as Twitter is still alive to at nostalgiumpod or not.com, at nostalgiumpod. That's our Twitter handle. We're also on Instagram, so you can find us there. And if Elon Musk just drives the thing into the ground, we'll find somewhere else to put this. So until then, I think we can say that is one more entry in the Nostalgium Arcanum. Turtle Power!
Cowabunga!
We were awesome!
Bodacious!
Yeah!
Good shit!
Yeah! Gnarly! Radical! Yeah!
Totally toothless, dude!
Wicked! Hell delicious. Omega.
I have always liked Cowabunga.
Huh?
I made a funny.
Yeah.